That night in the hooch, the mechanics and maintenance were wishing me good luck. My buddy Ray asked me if I had a death wish volunteering to be a combat crew chief. You could get killed real quick flying around like that. I know I said, but it's something I have to do. It was difficult to explain, but I didn't want others to fight a war for me while I stayed fairly safe at the base. It just didn't seem fair, although I knew that without mechanics on the ground, the helicopters could not fly. Everyone's job was important in Vietnam. Some were just more dangerous than others. And besides being infantry, being part of a combat crew on a Huey in an assault helicopter company was the most dangerous job one could ask for. Well, I asked for it, and I guess I got it. My first day flying with the flight as a Huey crew chief was surreal. I cannot believe that 10 helicopters are going to pick up infantry, 6 on each, and go out and look to kill guys who at the same time will try to kill us. Reality struck. This whole idea of war is insanity, I thought, and now I am part of it. You would think that adults would figure war was crazy and refrain from the thought of people trying to kill other people. After all, staying alive and living in relative comfort would be the wish of any sane person. I was raised to be kind and to help people, not kill them. Now I'm really a part of the war. I feel I'm a spectator, a tourist of war, but I will be in it now. I wanted to see what war was like and how I would react to it all. Well, I am now going to find out. But the whole organization of 12 helicopters going out on a man-hunting expedition was difficult for my mind to take in as a reality. We were both the hunters and the prey, and so was the other side, and both sides armed to the teeth. It was a deadly game that no participant could possibly win. What a lot of activity for a totally insane purpose. Adults really think this is okay. Well, so much for the intelligence of humanity. Perimeter guard and anything else I ever did was zero compared to this organized insanity. I couldn't believe I was part of this. I couldn't believe I was doing this. But I was. I still felt that I was just an observer, a tourist observing a war in a certain place and time. Well, welcome to vacation land, as some veterans called Vietnam. We picked up 60 infantry fellows from the 25th Infantry Division in an area of the Cu Chi base camp. They were fully armed with bandoliers and machine gun ammo belts of bullets crisscrossing their chests and grenades hanging from their web gear. None of them were laughing, and all seemed to be either on the serious or scared side or both. They all looked sad. There were none with the bravado, "Let's go get them boys, rah-rah." This wasn't high school or college or anything else. It was war. It was get killed time. I was told that we would be going to an area that was full of enemy. There were no friendly villages around. It was all bad guys waiting in bad guy land to kill American troops who were stupid enough to fly into their usual ambush areas. Apparently they were told the same thing. I was thinking, why go there then? So stupid. But here we were, bouncing and swaying in the wind and heading into a most likely bad situation. We were flying at about 200 feet up at about 100 miles per hour, the scenery rushing below us. I had my radio control set to only hear our company's comments. That is the communications between the helicopter pilots and our own helicopter's crew members. The 2 gunship helicopters were flying above the designated landing zone, shooting their rockets and machine guns in preparation for our 10 helicopters to land at the LZ. This preparation was to keep the enemy off balance in case they were down there. The gunship said that they were receiving fire, so this means the bad guys are down there and the LZ will be a hot LZ, and we can expect the enemy to shoot at us as we fly into the LZ, while in the LZ and out of the LZ. And not only shoot at us with automatic 30 caliber rifles, but possible 51 caliber weapons, mortars and rocket propelled grenades, and rarely with 37mm anti-aircraft weapons or even mines on the ground. The enemy loved to shoot at the troop carrying Hueys, as we had 10 people bunched up in each one. And while attempting to land in the LZ, we would be stationary for a short while, like ducks on a pond. The flight commander said that all gunners will be firing coming into the LZ, in the LZ, and coming out of the LZ. That meant firing to both the left and right. This was called full suppression fire. We were in a staggered flight pattern, and upon landing we would be shooting between helicopters and the infantry fellows jumping out of the helicopters. I leaned over to the sergeant of the infantry sitting next to me and told him the LZ was going to be hot, and that once they felt the skids hit the ground, they were to jump out 3 on each side and to hit the ground as we would be shooting the machine guns over them. They could shoot also as we came in, but be careful not to shoot the rotor blades above them, which could happen if we made a quick bank for some reason. And I told him that tell his guys to be careful of the tail rotor as one cannot see it turning, stay away from the back of the helicopter. Many an infantry fellow was decapitated by running into the tail rotor, not seeing it. The helicopter crews and the infantry were very tense as we approached the LZ. This was it. Some crossed themselves being Christian, some kissed their good luck charms that hung around their necks. Everyone was super alert. I started to shoot my machine gun into the trees and bushes that lined my side of the LZ. I just held the trigger down and sprayed everything I saw like a garden hose. The helicopter's front lifted up as the pilots attempted to stop our forward motion and the skids hit the ground. The infantry all jumped out at that time. I continued to hold the trigger down. The helicopter's nose tilted down on liftoff as we tried to get out of the LZ as quick as possible. The noise was unbelievable. 20 machine guns firing and 12 helicopters in one place while explosions from gunship rockets were exploding to the sides of us. There was also firing from the enemy as helicopters were calling in that they were taking rounds. That meant that people were probably being hit by bullets also. When in the helicopter, our only defense was to keep shooting in the direction of the people shooting at us. There were no trees or rocks to hide behind. We were always in full view of the guys shooting at us, nowhere to hide, but the poor infantry fellows were left on the ground to face who knows how many enemy troops. Helicopter crews were reporting bullet hits and casualties as we flew out of the LZ. My aircraft commander, who flew left seat and was senior pilot, asked if anyone was hit. We all responded negative, that we were okay. He said that we were returning to Cu Chi to refuel and to pick up more infantry as the guys that we just inserted into the LZ were taking fire and were reporting dead and wounded already. We will be shutting down at the refueling point to check out damage to any of the helicopters, and the helicopters with wounded and dead will first go to the field evacuation hospital and drop them off. I really got deep into the field war instantly by volunteering for crew chief duty. This was an everyday occurrence, as I soon found out. No wonder very few wanted to fly as helicopter crew members. We flew into line up at the fueling point, which was called the PAL for short. We shut the engines down so that we could check for bullet damage. We had 2 bullet holes on my side in the tail boom, but nowhere else. They went right through, doing no damage to the tail rotor drive shaft or tail rotor control cables, luckily. Otherwise, we could have been still in the LZ or crash landing somewhere between the LZ and here. The bullet holes were about 3 feet to my left at my level. Anyway, I showed the holes to the AC, aircraft commander, and told him no flight damage had occurred. The whole flight fueled up and went to the pickup point to pick up more infantry fellows as reinforcement for the others we just inserted. 2 helicopters had flight issues with bullet holes, and those crews filled in for the wounded in the other helicopters. We picked up the infantry fellows and off we went, 8 helicopters this time instead of 10. The infantry were tuned into what their friends were going through at the LZ through a few radio sets. It would take us 20 minutes of flying time to reach the LZ. That would amount about an hour since we left the 60 infantry fellows in the LZ fighting for their lives. 10 seconds is an eternity in a hot battle. No one thinks of apple pie and the American flag when a battle is going on. One only thinks about how to stay alive and how to fight back. The supposed search and destroy operation turned into a total defense operation, and the infantry fellows are trying to keep themselves from being annihilated in the LZ. We flew as fast as we could back to the first LZ with the reinforcements, 48 very concerned infantry. Of course, the flight crews were very concerned also. Someone on the ground was saying that enemy fire was coming from the tree line on the left. The gunships were rearmed and refueled and were pouring rockets and machine gun fire into the tree line. We were told only to shoot from the left side, full suppression left side only, as we would be landing between the enemy and the tree line and the survivors of the first guys we put into the LZ. I told the infantry on the helicopter to shoot at only the tree line as our gunners will be doing, because their guys would be on the right side of us as we land. Also, 3 from each side of the helicopter will jump out as the skids hit the ground and keep low, as we will be shooting the tree line up coming in, landing and going back out. Good luck. The helicopter crews would also be picking up some wounded if possible from the first insertion. This idea of landing right in front of the enemy had everyone scared except me, I think. I was becoming too airsick to be too concerned about my welfare in all of this. I could function, but I felt absolutely terrible, and my stomach and head were reeling. A bullet may be a comfort, I thought, but as we flew in, I started spraying the tree line with bullets from my machine gun by holding the trigger down. When the skids hit the ground, troopers jumped out 3 on each side. The reason for 3 jumping from each side is so the helicopter does not wobble from imbalance if we are a little off the ground, and also, it's the fastest way of exiting the aircraft. 2 wounded infantry guys were put on the helicopter from the right side. It seemed that when the gunships came back and started to rip up the tree line with their rockets, the enemy somehow disappeared. Luckily for all of us. 1 wounded guy had his foot blown off and the other was shot in the arm. I noticed a shoe was thrown on the helicopter, and as I looked at it, I realized that it still had a bloody foot in it. Hopefully it was the wounded guy's foot. A lot of guys who had their limbs blasted off from explosions survived because the wound was cauterized from the heat of the explosion so that the burnt flesh stopped the bleeding. Otherwise, guys with their limbs torn off would die very quickly from loss of blood. It was common practice to throw on the same helicopter whatever the other guys thought were the wounded guy's limbs. Sometimes the limbs would be found a distance from the body. It was like, whose leg is this? Whose arm is this? Sometimes if a guy had a good-sized explosion happen exactly where he was, nothing much could be found of the body except a hand here or intestines there, a head over there. Sometimes he was considered the lucky guy. He was dead before he knew what happened. I reached over for the ammo box to reload my machine gun and leaned on by accident the wounded guy's leg stump. He yelled in pain and swore at me. "Oh, sorry, buddy." I was very airsick for the next 3 days. Very. Even on the ground I was throwing up the contents of my stomach and my head was reeling. I was dizzy and almost falling down when trying to stand. I was just barely functioning. I tried eating a little bit of my sea rations. That came up immediately. Drank a little water, same thing. I could not keep anything down. I had help from my friends from maintenance while on the ground with my mechanic's work. In the air, I managed until the 3rd day I jammed my machine gun up when normally I would not. That could be deadly to the helicopter crew and others. I decided at the end of the long flight day that I would talk to the aircraft commander and tell him that I could not fly anymore. I wanted to fly but could not because of air sickness. He asked if I was frightened so much that I was getting sick. I said no, that I would get sick in the family car on a long drive, same thing. I said I was way too sick to be scared, and I looked at a bullet as a morbid relief. I told him I could not keep anything down, including water, for the last 3 days. Besides airsick, I was weak from lack of food and dehydrated from lack of water. The AC, aircraft commander, talked to others about my condition. It was decided that I would remain flying but would need to eat a good meal, drink water, and keep it all down. The company cook was given an order to make only me a special breakfast about 3 a.m. in the morning. I don't know where he got the food, but I had 2 real eggs, 2 pieces of toast, bacon, real milk, and some ginger root. I flew that day and never got airsick again, except on one night mission that the company had to do when the whole company was drunk on their butts because we were to have 1 day off from flying the next day. What a joy it was not to be airsick. Unbelievably wonderful. I really enjoyed flying around in the open door of the helicopter. I found out that I could listen to different frequencies from different radios at the same time by clicking on and off certain toggle switches on my radio control panel above my head in the helicopter. I liked listening to my helicopter crew, of course, and the whole flight company's back and forth radio transmissions, and also Armed Forces radio station broadcasting from Saigon with all the latest rock and roll hits of 1967 and 1968. and later 1969. The 116th Assault Helicopter Company was one big happy family while peacefully flying along at about 2,400 feet in the air, bouncing up and down and back and forth and sideways sway with air currents. 2,400 feet up was supposed to be out of accurate .30 caliber range. It was so peaceful flying above Vietnam. No mosquitoes or flies or leeches or any kinds of annoying insects. The air was cool and fresh, blowing through the completely open doors of the helicopter. The gunners and crew chiefs would just sit back and enjoy the beautiful scenery of Vietnam. Vietnam was very green and beautiful, a paradise except for a crazy war going on below. But at 2,400 feet up, it was superbly peaceful and dreamy. Nothing but good and peaceful thoughts would flow through my head. The green upper skylight above the pilots' heads would throw a green rotor blade chattering shadow all over the helicopter. It was hypnotic. It was so hypnotic that many pilots would fall under the hypnotic spell and accidentally get too close to another helicopter in our formation and could cause a mid-air collision. The gunners and crew chiefs had to watch for that tendency for hypnotic vertigo by pilots and call out too close on the left or whatever. I had to call out a couple of times because of the hypnotic drifting tendency to crash into another helicopter. Vietnam in the air became my wondrous dreamland. It was surreal. I was feeling so astonishingly wonderful not being airsick that I loved flying. I really mean loved flying. I couldn't think of anything else that could make me feel this happy, this wonderful, this alive. I was actually starving and dehydrating myself by being airsick that I may have been on the verge of death. I was so deliriously happy now because of how terrible and miserable I felt then. I'd rather be flying on a Huey helicopter above Vietnam than doing anything else. I found out also that I loved flying so much that I had no fear of death. Possibly when going through my airsick days, fear receded to the point of vanishing and never really came back. I also found out that to survive any calamity in the best way possible is to have a steady, clear, and cool mind. To lose all fear is the best way to make sure you can react to any circumstance with a clear, thoughtful mind. I guess what I heard from Danny the hero sunk in. Hey, we all got to die sometime, so why be afraid of it? I thought that he was a little nuts or a lot nuts for thinking that way. But later when new guys came to volunteer to fly combat, I even said that. Many guys felt that the Huey gunners and crew chiefs were nuts to put themselves through so much danger when they didn't need to. Most of the gunners came from the infantry, so I could more clearly understand their reasoning for flying. It's better than slogging along the ground, getting eaten up by mosquitoes and other pests such as flies and leeches, snipers shooting at them, stepping on landmines, and getting totally annihilated by ambush traps. Plus, the heavy packs they carried through mud and up and down hills and cutting their way through jungle. Pure torture and misery. The active infantry had it the worst in Vietnam, no doubt about it. But the crew chiefs could have stayed safe at the base camp as mechanics. They were the certified nutcases, so thought many. But the ones I knew were dedicated heroes that enjoyed flying and being frontline fighters. My excuse was family tradition in frontline warfare.